friends. Hope you had a great weekend. That was Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey Now, great way to kick off every episode of Scott Fox After 9. Welcome to it. It's a brand new week, and I'm thinking that this one's going to be somewhat of a quieter week. All of the politicians have gone back to their ridings. Nobody is in Ottawa. They're all back in their ridings for Remembrance Day ceremonies. That's one day. One day. And it doesn't even take up much of their time. I'm wondering why they needed the whole week off to observe Remembrance Day. But I'll assume that our politicians have some sort of a good explanation for that. Coming up on this episode, though, you are going to hear from the Prime Minister. You're going to hear from Opposition Leader Pierre Poilievre. And one of the things I'm going to do in this episode is call out more of the media bias. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I was watching a fair bit of news this weekend, and the lead story, just about everywhere, dissension in the ranks. The Conservative Party of Canada is coming apart under the leadership of Pierre Poilievre. Very little coverage on the budget, though. So we're looking at a situation where one Conservative member crossed the floor over to the Liberals, and another one resigned his position, but that's not going to take effect until the spring. So we're talking about one guy who seems like he was a Liberal from the start. I'm going to play some audio from this guy, Chris D'Entremont, later on in this episode. He does seem like he was always on Team Carney. He was very buddy-buddy with the Liberals. So they gave him whatever, and he went and crossed the floor over to the Liberals, and the media is running around like a dog with a bone on this story, trying to make it seem like there's all kinds of chaos in the Conservative Party because one person left. And, you know, if they do see it that way, that's fine. Maybe that's their prerogative. But to completely ignore the fact that we've got a budget in front of the House right now that is going to include generational spending and generational debt. That's hardly getting any coverage because all the media wants to do is sow distrust in the Conservative Party of Canada. That's part of their bias, and frankly, I think it's gross. Let me play for you just quickly some comments from the Conservative House Leader, Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer, I thought, summed it up very, very nicely the other day outside the House of Commons. Listen to this.
I can guarantee you, okay, you stop 100 people in any main street in this country. They are uninterested in palace intrigue. They are uninterested in parliamentary press gallery reporting on Liberal-sourced rumors. They are interested in facts that will affect their life. And the facts of this budget are their costs are going to go up. Inflation is already on the rise. Food inflation is already way over budget. There are alarm bells being sounded by everybody from the parliamentary budget officer to the Bank of Canada governor to credit rating agencies saying that the path that Mark Carney has put us on is unsustainable. That's what Conservatives are focused on. We are going to hold this government to account. We're going to fight to bring down prices, and we're not going to let Liberal sources put out rumors to distract from a terrible budget that Canadians are giving a giant thumbs down to. Thank you very much.
Is that how you see it as well? That's definitely how I see it. Hey, the Conservatives lost a member, and that person crossed the floor over to the Liberals. Okay, we're talking about maybe a brief story on the news. Brief, for like a day, and then the story is over, like every other time that someone has crossed the floor in the House of Commons. But the media is still on this thing, and frankly, I think it's very dishonest. Like Andrew Scheer said, all of our cost of living is going to go back up a lot. And the media is not focusing on that. All they want to do is try and take down Pierre Poilievre. They do not want Pierre Poilievre to continue on as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. And that's the reason that this narrative is out there, and the reason that so many news outlets are pushing this story so much. They're trying to sow a lot of dissension within the Conservative Party. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not real. It's a media narrative. And frankly, all the Conservatives that I spoke to this weekend seem quite united. They're all quite happy with the probability of Pierre either getting an opportunity to have an election here next month or sometime in the spring. Now, that can't happen, though, if the Liberals maintain a majority government. They don't have a majority, but they're really hinting that they've got the votes to pass this budget and to do whatever they want. And maybe they do. I have no reason to not believe them when they say they think they've got the votes. But either way, what's going on here is very dishonest. And I hope that everybody can see that. Every time the mainstream media runs a story, again, talking about this one guy who crossed the floor, They're not talking about the budget. They're not talking about something that will have a profound impact on all of our lives. Again, Andrew Scheer was right. Bank of Canada sounding the alarm bells. Parliamentary budget officer sounding alarm bells. Everybody warning this is not sustainable, what Mark Carney wants to do. But the media is giving him a free pass because they want to take down Pierre Poilievre. There's really no other way to see it. I'm open to compromise on a lot of things, but I don't think anybody could watch news coverage in Canada right now and agree that that's objective reporting. It's not. I'm going to leave that there, but I will come back to Pierre Poilievre and I will come back to Mark Carney a little bit later on in this episode. Here in the GTA, Southern Ontario, where I come to you from every day, we got our first snowstorm of the year. Very early this year, the 9th of November. On average, about 10 centimeters of snow. Hey, have we gotten any better at driving in the first snowfall of the year? Have we done that? Because it seems like every year, first snowfall, it's like bumper cars on our highways. Well, let's see. Here's OPP Sergeant Kerry Schmidt.
Well, the snow is continuing to fall right now. In the last 24 hours, the OPP here in the GTA responded to about 220 collisions, in addition to another 120 or so incidents where vehicles were in the ditch or stuck, and we were not able to attend. So a very busy 24 hours. If you're heading out this morning, make sure you clear your vehicle from all the ice and snow. It might be frozen, your doors might be stuck, your windows are going to be covered. Make sure you clear it all off so you can see all the way around your vehicle. When you do hit the roads, the highways are mostly wet, but the side roads, the sidewalks, are still very crunchy with snow and ice, and if you hit the brakes quickly or hard, you could find your vehicle sliding. So hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, look where you're going and give yourself a little extra time. It will be a little slower Monday morning commute. Please take care, please drive safe, and have a wonderful day.
Kerry's great. Always does a good job. But let's circle back on something he said. 340 collisions in just the GTA from the first snowstorm. 340 of them. I'm going to suggest we're not getting better. And I have a bit of proof, actually, to offer you. I spent all weekend in Brampton, Ontario. Brampton is just northwest of Toronto, if you are not familiar with the greater Toronto area. I was there because it was the Canadian University Men's Lacrosse National Championship, and I'm the commissioner of the league. So I had to be there this weekend as we awarded the Bagataway Cup, and congratulations to the University of Guelph, who beat Nipissing in a fantastic final, a snow bowl game. We had to have crews out there shoveling the lines in between whistles just so the players could play the game. It was a really neat experience. Glad I got to be there, but wow, was it ever cold. And as for Brampton itself, all of the stereotypes that I've been hearing were true. I saw them with my own eyes. If it was one or two people, I probably could have looked the other way, but it was way more than that. The number of people that made a right-hand turn from the left lane. Think about that. You can't get your driver's license if you think it's okay to turn right from the left lane. But I saw this time and time and time again. The amount of people who, without even signaling, would just pull a U-turn in the middle of an intersection, sometimes on a red light. It was happening nonstop. I'm starting to understand why insurance rates are so high in the city of Brampton. That city is loaded with bad drivers. That was my anecdotal experience. I was actually shocked at how bad people were at driving in that city. They got to do something there. I've been a big advocate for a long time of maybe we need a big re-education. I got my driver's license in the early 90s. And back then, you just got your license. You got your beginners when you turned 16, and then 30 days later, you could take your full G road test. It was great. I had my whole license just a couple of months after I turned 16. And since then, nobody has ever wondered, is Scott still a good driver? Well, replace me with just about anybody else. Maybe we should be checking to make sure that people are good drivers if they're going to have a license and unfettered access to the highways and roads around us. If people are doing crazy stuff like turning right from the left-hand lane, that is a big problem. Now, I don't want to go in and have to write a test again, but Jesus, we got to do something. It was bad up there. Something else I want to mention here quickly before I get into the content. This Saturday night, I'm doing a rare nightclub appearance. I don't do these very often anymore, but back in the day when I was doing Top 40 radio in Toronto, at one point I was doing 5 club appearances a week and still doing the morning show. That was a grind. I swear that thing shaved years off of my life. But either way, I don't do it very often anymore because, well, I'm not really into clubbing anymore. But every now and again, an event comes up and I'll agree to do it because I think it sounds fun. This Saturday night, there's going to be a reunion party for Progress Saturdays at Elements Nightclub in Kitchener. Beautiful Kitchener, Ontario. I was at Elements every Saturday night for about 6 years back in the day, in the early 2000s. And we used to have a great time there. Well, this Saturday night, one night only, they're bringing it back. And it's not just me. It's all of the original DJs that used to be there with me on Saturday nights. DJ Matt Daddy, DJ Rob Bass, DJ Stevie P. It's going to be a ton of fun. It's on King Street, downtown Kitchener. I'm going to be there this Saturday, and I'm going to throw out a few more reminders about that throughout the week right here on Scott Fox After 9. All right, I think it's time to get into the content here, or the rest of the content. I've got some great stuff to play for you, so I hope you can give me a little bit of your time. I'm going to try and wrap this up in less than an hour, and I'm going to start off with a speech that the Prime Minister gave just the other day. He was talking to the Canadian Club of Toronto, and a few interesting things came from that. Listen to the Prime Minister.
And we're in one now, to be clear. We're in one now. Technological change is accelerating rapidly. The world has become more dangerous and divided, and that decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship between Canada and the United States is over. And as a consequence of particularly that last point, many of our former strengths, based on our close ties to America, have become our vulnerabilities. And this is happening fast. This is not a transition, it's a rupture. And it means that our economic strategy needs to change dramatically and rapidly. And that's the context, that was the context for Tuesday's budget, the first of our government. Now, in the budget, we estimate that U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty that they're creating will cost Canadians about 1.8% of our GDP. Translating that, it's about $50 billion lost from our economy, the equivalent of about $1,300 for every Canadian. And if we don't act now, those losses will only grow. So part of our point is that nostalgia is not a strategy. The U.S. has changed. That's their right. But we must respond. That is our imperative.
The Prime Minister is absolutely right, but not right at the same time. Yeah, there has been a change in the relationship between Canada and the U.S. The U.S. wants to even out the trade relationship, and as you just heard Prime Minister Carney say in his own words, that's their right. But we, of course, were very reliant on the Americans because we did have a trade deal that favored us. That's why there was a trade imbalance that the Americans are trying to even out. So Mark Carney wants to make all kinds of changes in Canada. Now, the problem here is that we don't all agree on the best path forward. You've got the opposition Conservatives who say we need to take advantage of our resources. Let's get building that road to the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario. Let's build pipelines and get our oil out to the coasts. Let's repeal all of the Trudeau-era laws that made it impossible for us to get our product out to market. Let's do all of those things, and let's do them quickly. Mark Carney's got a different strategy. You might recall, if you're one of my OG listeners that's been with me since the beginning of this pod, when Mark Carney announced he wanted to be Prime Minister, I pointed out to you, Mark Carney is very, very, very much an environmentalist. I'm a little conflicted about that because so far Mark Carney has done a lot of things that would make you think he's not an environmentalist. He got rid of the consumer portion of the carbon tax. He got rid of some of Justin Trudeau's, what do we call them, regulations. Okay, that's fine. Elizabeth May, leader of the Green Party of Canada, is hopping mad. She does not like Mark Carney right now. She says Mark Carney is no friend of the environment. So I thought, okay, well, maybe he's given up on that grift, and maybe he's trying to turn a new leaf, and maybe he actually is going to do what he says he's going to do and let us get our product out to market. I'm starting to think, no, that was a nice thought, but that's not what he's doing. The Prime Minister has now announced a and I had to double check it to make sure I was saying this right, but I'm right. $1 trillion climate competitiveness strategy. $1 trillion. It wasn't that long ago. Governments dealt in millions of dollars. And it was very, very rare that a government would say the B word, billions. That was serious if a government was going to spend billions. And it was all over the news. Huge story if a government came out with that kind of a number. Now we're going into trillions, and I'm sure you would probably agree if you look around, we don't really have an extra $1 trillion in this country. In fact, we're $2 trillion in debt. Where are we going to get $1 trillion? And what is a climate competitiveness strategy? The nearest I can tell, we are going to sell our oil, but it's going to all have to be refined differently and a whole bunch of regulations on it. We've got to make sure that we're capturing the carbon and all of these other things to the tune of $1 trillion. Again, we don't have $1 trillion. I'm really not sure where the Prime Minister is coming from on that one, but let's hear a little bit more of his speech.
What the budget does is it builds Canada strong by focusing on what we can control. And that's building at home to protect and empower Canadians. It's boosting our productivity to drive lasting prosperity. It's transforming how government works for you. And it's diversifying our trade partners to create more opportunity and greater independence. We estimate that the budget, measures in the budget, will help unleash over $1 trillion in investment over the next 5 years. And that alone will increase our GDP by 3.5%. That's about $3,500 for every Canadian. In other words, twice of what's being taken from us.
Okay, so we're going to get $1 trillion in investment, he thinks. When you look at the lay of the land right now, think geopolitical for just a second. How many companies do you think are lining up to invest in Canada? Because the Prime Minister says stuff like that, but there's no expectation of it actually happening. I don't expect that's going to happen. I don't believe there's investors out there with $1 trillion that want to sink it into Canada. If there's investors out there with $1 trillion, I don't know that we're on top of their list, if you know what I mean. If you disagree, hey, we'll find out who's right soon enough. But Mark Carney seems to think there's $1 trillion in investments coming to Canada because of our climate competitiveness strategy. I would love to know where he realistically thinks that's going to come from. Even his company, Brookfield, intimately tied to America. So I don't know that it's Brookfield that's coming in here to spend $1 trillion. Who's got it, and what is it going to be spent on? I guess that remains to be seen. I'm going to skip over the rest of this because the Prime Minister, when he gives a speech, it's basically the same speech every time. He moves certain paragraphs around, ends a different way occasionally, but it's all the same talking points, and he really wants Canadians to get behind this new budget. Everybody that I've spoken to, everybody, is uninspired by this budget. Some people are downright angry about this budget and how much money it's spending and how much debt it's going to leave us with. Even Liberals are telling me it's uninspiring, pointing out that there's really not a lot in there for the average Canadian. There's stuff in there to help sectors that have been hit by tariffs and promises to do all these nice things, and it certainly spends a hell of a lot of money, but that's the only thing I'm actually confident is going to happen, is that we're going to spend a ton of money. What kind of results do you think we'll have when we look back in 5 years at this budget? What kind of results do you think we'll have? How much do you think will be built? Because based on the track record of this government, it seems like not a lot gets done. Big announcement, very little follow through. Let's get to some of the Q&A after the speech there. And I'm going to give Mark Carney credit, by the way, before I move on. I don't know how he did that. People sitting there eating and listening to his speech. You can hear plates clinking and silverware and glasses. I actually have a lot of respect for leaders that say no food on the table when I'm speaking. That's my personal rule. No food when I'm doing a speech. If it's just the middle of the road, we're making announcements and, hey, the bar's open, the DJ's going to be on later, that's fine. But if somebody's speaking You shouldn't be eating at the same time. It's weird. But the Prime Minister, maybe he didn't know that that's an option, is to make sure that there's no food on the table when he's speaking. Maybe next time he'll correct that, but good on him for powering through when all of that commotion was going on. It's very distracting. Anyway, here's some of the Q&A with the Prime Minister.
This is your first budget as Prime Minister,
Yes.
But every budget, I think, it comes with the same dueling complaint. You spent too much and you didn't spend enough. So let's address some of the criticism that maybe you didn't do enough. That if you're going to do deficits, really go after it for the business community, corporate taxes, take an axe to regulations. And you do that in certain ways. Some tax rates do go down. But if you really wanted it to be sweeping and not just competitive with the U.S., but ultra, really go after it with tax cuts and reducing regulation.
Well, I think the first thing, I agree with your characterization of budgets, and it's a balancing act. One of the things that comes, let me break this into a few points. One is we are spending a lot less. Basically, we're stopping spending growth, but we are investing at the same time. We made a big effort, $60 billion of savings that we're finding in order to preserve what makes Canada Canada, the social programs, the federal-provincial relationship. So we preserve those, and we're using our fiscal room, our fiscal space to invest. And it is big. It is big. It's far and away the biggest investment in defense, far and away the $450 billion cash investment equivalent over the next 5 years. That is enormous.
He's right. It is enormous. Does anybody understand yet? Are you any closer to figuring out what the guy is talking about when he says we're going to spend less to invest more? He just said we've identified $60 billion in savings. That's great. We were overspending by $60 billion. That's bananas. But at least you've identified it and you're going to cut that. But that doesn't go back into the coffers. He's then going to spend it. If you figure out a way to save some money in your household, it'd be nice to save that money. No, if you just redirect it to different spending, you didn't really save anything. You just move some pieces around on a puzzle. You just move some pieces around on a chessboard. You didn't actually make your house any better. You save in one area but spend in the other. That's not really getting any further ahead. And that's what I don't think the Prime Minister understands about how Canadians are feeling. When he says, we found all these savings, we are spending less. And then in the very next breath, talks about how much he's spending. Think about that. We're not getting any further ahead here. Here's more of the Prime Minister.
We're doing it in a way that still preserves some fiscal flexibility because the world, we're still AAA. We have the lowest deficit in the G7. Going forward for the next 5 years. We have the strongest balance sheet in the G7 and most of the advanced economies. So we still have fiscal flexibility because we're in a more dangerous world, and you don't want to spend all of that at one time. So we think we have absolutely the balance right. Now let me go to the tax point. We are 4 points. This is a sophisticated room. We are 4 points through the United States for investment. Okay? You have to be able to calculate what a sales tax is as well as what your top marginal rate is and what accelerated depreciation. That is a big gap. That is a big gap. Now, it is not the only consideration, of course, in making investment. If it were just tax policy, Ireland, I guess, would have the largest. Ireland's got a lot of quasi-investment. They don't have a lot of real investment there. All due respect to Ireland. Sorry, okay, that's a whole other
cause and effect.
Exactly. The regulation point is a crucial point. Fully accept that. The way we're attacking that is through the nation-building projects. So we have an ability with nation-building projects to balance regulatory decisions across what's in the best interest for the country, what's going to advance us becoming climate competitive, what's going to advance Indigenous interests, and there are a huge range of things. We've been in government for 6 months. We've made a bunch of those. I think you can see the direction of where the government is going to go. I guess the other thing I would say,
I don't see the direction the government is going to go. It seems like the entire direction is get as much money out the door as quickly as possible. And, this isn't like COVID. COVID, yeah, okay, we're going to help out all these different industries, and people need help and businesses need help. And that was an all hands on deck kind of effort. The CRA stepped up and they did get money out the door very, very quickly for people and for businesses. That's not what this prime minister is doing. We don't even really know where the money is going. The spending is unbelievable. The debt will be generational. I know the prime minister likes to brag. Oh, we've got the lowest debt in the G7, and we've got a AAA credit rating, and all of those things are in jeopardy. All of them are. I don't know that he understands how bad things are for the middle class. Let me give you an example. Waterloo Region. I was just talking about Kitchener. I'm going to be there on Saturday at Elements Nightclub for a reunion party for Progress Saturdays. What's up, Kitchener? The food bank of Waterloo Region just announced a 205% increase in the amount of people using the food bank in Waterloo Region. A 205% increase in the amount of people going in there to use their services. I'll tell you the story. 622,000 visits between July 2024 and July 2025. 622,000 people had to use the food bank in one region. CEO Kim Willem, I know Kim very well. She's great and does a real good job with the resources that she has to work with. She says the numbers reflect the growing impact of rising living costs and ongoing food insecurity. She called the situation deeply concerning. And Kim is absolutely right. That is deeply concerning. And it really doesn't seem like this prime minister gets that.
Every holiday, I look for gifts that feel thoughtful and taste unforgettable. And Omaha Steaks never disappoints. From tender, juicy filet mignons to cozy comfort meals and gourmet sides, they make holiday entertaining effortless. I've given Omaha Steaks as a gift before, and the reaction is always pure excitement. The flavor, quality, and presentation are unmatched. Every cut is perfectly aged, hand-trimmed by master butchers, and guaranteed to impress. Whether you're hosting, gifting, or treating yourself, Omaha Steaks brings 5 generations of uncompromising quality to every celebration. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use promo code FLAVOR at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code FLAVOR.
before I hand back for your last question, since I've answered too long for this one, is the other thing I would say is the actual investments we're making as a government are very strategic in that they unlock. So I'm going to take advantage of, this may not be directly relevant for Anico Eagle, but we're doing first mile and last mile investment that helps unlock huge range of critical minerals and others across Canada, because you just can't get to them. The whole Grays Bay Point in Nunavut, port in Nunavut, opens up the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, northern Alberta opportunities there. So a lot of what's been holding back some of the investment, we're attacking with strategic investment. Why is the government deciding what's in the national interest and what projects get? Can't everybody have access to that? Everyone can have access, yeah. No. Constrained growth? Well, first off, there are certain things you want your government to do. And one of the things you want your government to do, look, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on this table here. It is unrealistic to ask one company, however big and successful, to build all of the transportation infrastructure into the Ring of Fire, La Fosse de Labrador, the entire Northwest Territory. That's like the government's job. Unlocking ports and port infrastructure, that is also our responsibility. Providing so there's certain things that we do that is our responsibility, and what we're determining with the provinces, with input from the private sector, with input from other stakeholders, is where are we going to get the highest return for doing that. That's the first element. But the vast, vast majority of the investment that's catalyzed by this budget is decided in rooms like this and the organizations that you represent, because it's the productivity superdeduction. That's just like somebody has to decide to build the data center, the infrastructure, the ITC. Again, looking at the table here, Bruce Power has to decide what they want to do in terms of expanding their generation fleet. So most of it is decided by the private sector. We've just advantaged it tremendously.
So the private sector's involved, but the government's going to pay for it. Everything that Prime Minister says sounds like it's out of touch. Sorry, said, not says. Everything in that sounded out of touch. If you had some extra money right now, maybe you got an inheritance, maybe you made more money selling your house than you thought you would, and you're thinking, I'd like to open a business. Did anything that the Prime Minister just said give you any hope that opening that business, you could be successful? Any of it? Because it seems to me all of this is aimed at corporations. And when money gets given from the taxpayers to corporations, we know what happens. It's gone, and there's nowhere for us Canadian taxpayers to complain. Well, we tried, but whatever. They're not going to open up that EV battery factory after all. They just took our billions and ran. Feels like that's where we're going again, but on a much, much, much bigger scale and with much higher stakes.
They've already made the decision to go ahead. You're at least expediting all the checks that you need.
Well, in many cases we are, but we're also just making the economics of it.
But there are people, you know this, that just...
Such a downer.
You did a great job, but Riley, I'm going to bring us all back down to earth. You know that there are people...
We're not coming back. No. Amber.
I don't want to
Amber, no,
either.
like that. We've had too long down, looking down, not taking risk. This is like this. The risk is not to take risk. In a situation like this, you've got to decide where you're going. And we got to put capital to work in the country. So you bring us down. Okay, with that.
I'm not going to bring you down. Yeah. I'm going to say, why can't we go even higher? Let's use the energy sector as an example. Yep. There are a lot of things that are preventing them from even bringing a major project to your office, according to them. Bill C-69, emissions cap.
Nope.
I mean, that's what they say.
That's what they say, but they're wrong.
Why?
Yeah, they're wrong. No, they're wrong because literally we are getting projects coming in. We're in discussions with the province of Alberta directly on things. But look, we've also got a view that, as shared by the government of Alberta in the grand bargain, I'm going to quote the Premier of Alberta, that the future of oil export is going to be low carbon. So twinning additional, in that case.
How much is that going to raise the price of gas? Low carbon oil. Canada's going to lead the world in low carbon oil. Why can't we just do what every other oil producing nation does? Drill the oil, refine it into gas, sell it for a great price to the Canadian people, and at a decent markup for the rest of the world because it's our oil. And all be prosperous. That's what we always used to do until Justin Trudeau came along and started imposing regulations and tried everything he could to keep it in the ground. When we've got this much oil under Canada and we have this great a financial need, why on earth would we be tinkering around with low carbon oil? And again, how expensive is that going to be for the regular run-of-the-mill average person that just wants to fill their tank? How expensive is that going to be? Why can't we just do what everybody else does? They're not screwing around with low carbon oil in America. They're not doing that over in Saudi Arabia. Why are we going to do that to ourselves and make it even harder on ourselves again? And why is this Prime Minister so hell-bent on this green stuff? I think the vast majority of people have moved on. Even if you did at one point believe there was some existential threat to the world because of climate change, life gets in the way, other priorities come up, and right now our priority is putting food on the table and keeping the heat on this winter. I'm not interested in paying another penny for green initiatives right now. I want affordable energy and I want a lower cost of living. And I think that's what it comes down to for the lion's share of Canadians. That's what they want. This Prime Minister spending all of our money to try and do things that apparently the private sector is going to do, but we're going to get them started and we're going to finish it for them. I don't understand why. If the private sector is doing it, it's because they can make a profit. The private sector doesn't invest in things that don't make money. That's the way the world works. If they can make money, why would we give them any taxpayer money? You got to put up money to build these projects. They do, if they want to make money off of them. If it's a government project, then keep the private sector out of it. If these are taxpayer resources, building ports, I really don't know how much it costs to drudge a specific area and build a concrete pier. I have no idea how that can be a multi-billion-dollar project. I just don't get it. We are so bad at procurement. If the private sector wants to get involved, let them. But that means no taxpayer money. You want to build the port, you want to call the shots, you want to make the profit, then you put in the investment. Full stop. That's all there is to it. I really can't figure out what these public-private partnerships are and what they're supposed to achieve. And I want to know what fail-safes are in there for the Canadian people. You know, if we give taxpayer money to these corporations, what's to stop them from up and leaving? What if they don't hire as many people as they said they would? What if it never opens at all? We've seen that. We gave money to major pharmaceutical companies. Hey, open up a vaccine factory here in Canada. Didn't happen, but they still got our money. It's bananas. Speaking of climate, and before I go to Chris D'Entremont and Pierre Poilievre, who are still to come on the pod, right now, the COP26 conference is happening in Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. You know, this is the conference where all the environmentalists get together and party. And they like to put different rules in place. And they keep raising targets and things like that to make it seem like they're doing something. But make no mistake, this is a party for the global elites, all of these COP summits. In this particular case, they cut down 100,000 trees to build a highway to get to the place where the meeting is taking place. Does that seem like something that environmentalists would be supportive of? Cutting down that many trees to build a road to get all of these global elites in and out of the COP summit. Seems very counterintuitive to me if you're an environmentalist. How many private jets are landing in Brazil for this conference? Private jets, some of the worst things in the world for carbon emissions. And they've all got them, but they lecture us about our carbon footprint. Here is former Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, talking at this COP summit.
What would your message be to someone who might right now be sitting in the shoes that you once filled as a Prime Minister of a country who is dealing with domestic backlash?
Well, I think we've got to ask ourselves how we came to the point where something that is about the preservation of our planet for the next generation, how did that end up becoming so political? Because this really should in many ways be a very straightforward question. If immediately within the next 5 years, someone said that without significant change, you run the risk of, losing huge parts of our ecosystem, wildfires, tropical cyclones that will take many people's lives, and a planet that's so warm that people will die from from heat. If that presented itself with immediacy, then maybe we would be hearing different debates. But that is actually the consequence of indecision and inaction. There should be no politics in that. It should be much more straightforward. So to any politician, I would say endeavour to take the politics out because that is only holding us back.
Okay. She put the politics in it. All of these leaders did. They made it political. They taxed us because of this. They taxed us because they said they could change the weather. These politicians and their mainstream media friends have been driving this climate narrative for 30, 40 years now, telling us impending doom if we don't do this. If we don't buy a whole new fleet of electric buses, bam, Leamington, Ontario is going to be underwater. If we don't pay more in taxes, Nova Scotia will be lost to the sea. None of these things have ever happened. None of them. The ozone layer will be gone forever. Just last week, they announced the ozone layer is recovering so well that it could be completely repaired on its own. No money needed. This is a grift. And I have a feeling they're holding this one in Brazil because Donald Trump was making it way too hard to get cocaine out of South America. So they're just going right to the source. All of these global elites partying in Brazil right now on your dime, by the way. Taxpayers are paying for our team to be there, negotiating these fantasy targets that we never meet, and all discussing our impending doom that they've been saying for 40 years and hasn't happened. How much money did we waste on the Green New Deal, on the Green Revolution? We haven't made any progress. None. For her to start saying, don't make it political. They made it political. That's why we're in the situation we're in. You know what? Let's hear from, who's this prick? He is from the World Health Organization, I believe. Former Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros, I don't even know his name. You've seen this guy all over the news, though. Listen to him talking at COP30 here in Brazil.
Of the earth, we're reminded that healthy people depend on a healthy planet. If our planet were a patient, it would be admitted to intensive care. Its vital signs are alarming. It's running a high fever, with the average global temperatures increasing year after year. Its lung capacity is compromised, with the destruction of forests that absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. And many of the Earth's water sources, its lifeblood, are contaminated. Most concerning of all, its condition is deteriorating. A sick planet means sick people. The climate crisis is a health crisis, not in the future, but now. It's already spreading disease, worsening malnutrition, displacing communities, and claiming lives through heat, floods, fires, and pollution.
I'm going to stop this guy right there. 40 years they've been telling us the same thing over and over again, and none of it has ever come true. None of it. You know what I think the problem is? And I've mentioned this many times before. I'm not anti-environment, and I am pro-green. Here's the difference, though. These guys are only interested in reducing carbon emissions. And the reason they're interested in doing that is because they make money off of it. They're invested in the companies that are making the solar panels and the windmills and all these other things. There's kickbacks. The whole thing is a giant racket. They're only focused on carbon emissions. And yet the thing that can help us with carbon emissions, trees, they cut down 100,000 of them to build this road to get to the summit they were all at. It's completely ridiculous that anybody takes these people seriously now. Completely ridiculous. All of their dire predictions have turned out to not be true. They haven't made any progress except for in the area of partying. And that's exactly what they're doing in Brazil right now. They're having a big party. I am interested in some parts of the green revolution. Well, they're all focused on carbon emissions. What are we doing about protecting our ecosystems? What are we doing about preserving endangered species? What are we doing to clean up our waterways and make sure that there is clean drinking water here and around the world? He briefly touched on it there, but that's not really what he's interested in. Those people, the climate zealots, are interested in reducing carbon emissions. I want an environmental plan that's all-encompassing. I want an environmental plan that's going to preserve ecosystems and save endangered species, make our air more breathable, clean water. They're not interested in that stuff because they don't make money off of that stuff. Let's hear from another executive with the United Nations. The UN chief in this particular case is not talking about green. He's talking about misinformation that comes from social media about their plans to make everything green. This is Antonio Gutierrez.
The spread of hatred and lies online is causing grave harm to our world. Misinformation, disinformation, and hate speech are fueling prejudice and violence, exacerbating divisions and conflicts, demonizing minorities, and compromising the integrity of elections. Threats to information integrity are not new, but they are proliferating and expanding with unprecedented speed on digital platforms and supercharged by AI technologies. Science, facts, human rights, public health, climate action are under attack.
Public health and climate action are under threat because of misinformation and disinformation spreading online. In fact, they would probably accuse me here of spreading mis and disinformation when I'm not at all. I'm quite right to point out, for years, they've been telling us about our impending doom. How many times have you heard that Florida is going to be underwater by the year 2000? I used to hear it all the time. Oh, well, it'll be by 2010 for sure. It's 2025 and the water level has actually gone down, not up. What's going on here? Why do we let these people lie to us like that? And they gaslight us too. You know, they want mis and disinformation about climate initiatives and public health. They want that to stop because they want to put through their climate agenda and they want to put vaccines in everybody. The problem is social media did make it a lot easier for all of us to talk and compare notes. And we've all realized it's bullshit. We've all realized it. They were lying to us. They were gaslighting us to use our own money against us. Well, it's interesting that the UN is now very interested in regulating the internet because so is our Prime Minister.
Large American online platforms have become seas of racism, misogyny, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and hate in all its forms. And they're being used by criminals to harm our children. My government will act.
Mark Carney wants to regulate the internet for the same thing, but he's doing it. The head of the UN's doing it. They're saying it's to stop racism. Yeah, racism's out of control and misogyny is out of control. So we're going to need to regulate the internet. That's not why they want to regulate the internet. They want to regulate the internet because they don't want us to all be able to communicate with each other and share ideas and thoughts. They don't want you over there to say, you know what? For the first time this year, I didn't get a flu shot, and this is the first time in years I didn't get the flu. They don't want that kind of stuff out there. They don't want us comparing notes. They don't want us discussing amongst ourselves, the middle class, that maybe all of this is bull. They're going to regulate the internet, and they're going to label it hate speech if you dare question them. It's crazy. I'm going to move on. I could spend more time on the Prime Minister, but frankly, there's nothing new coming out of it. And I want to talk about the budget. I want to talk about how much money he's spending, and I want to know where it's going and who's getting rich, because it's a hell of a lot of money to be spending for nobody in particular to get rich. But I'm going to move on. Let's try and make it fair here. I'm going to balance it out with a little bit of the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre. He sat down at the Empire Club of Canada just the other day, and he had a lot to say. I'm going to play some of the Q&A. This, I think, is when Pierre Poilievre is at his best. Pierre sometimes comes off too aggressive, and a lot of people are saying he should be kinder. He should be nicer. I don't necessarily agree. I think it's different circumstances call for a different response. But one area I know Pierre thrives at is being a good dad and being a good husband.
So, Pierre, we're going to talk a little bit about policy, about politics and personal, but I want to start a little bit on personal. You and I are friends, but a lot of people in the audience are just still getting to know you. Your most important job outside of being leader of the opposition is as a committed father to Valentina and Cruz and a husband to the wonderful Anna. So my first question, you and Anna have been together for many years through campaigns, kids, and in the public eye. What has she taught you most through all of it?
Stay grounded. Definitely stay grounded. She comes from very humble beginnings. Obviously, she came as a refugee fleeing Venezuela, and they had to start from scratch. She was raised in a working class neighborhood in East End, Montreal, a tiny basement apartment, And she left home at 17, moved to Ottawa, worked at Best Buy, got a job in the west end of town selling electronics in English, even though she didn't speak English at the time. And that taught her how to solve problems and get things done. But she also reminds me that, no matter how high and mighty we in politics might think we are, it's the strivers like her family that we're working for. And our mission is to unlock their potential and give them the best possible lives. So she keeps me grounded and makes sure that the ego is always in check. And I think that's a healthy thing for any politician.
That's good to hear. She sounds like she'd be a great campaign manager.
She's not. She manages much more complicated operations, like getting the kids out the door in the morning, and producing. She produces an incredible magazine. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have.
A beautiful magazine, and she's a great writer, and she's founded her own businesses. So very talented, brilliant young woman.
Wonderful. And you said before that everything you do is about giving your kids and their generation the shot at the same opportunities that you had. What do you think has changed most for young families in Canada?
I just think the things that we used to take for granted are now out of reach, and the basic ambitions like starting a family, owning a house, having nutritious food every night, those are things that if you had a job at a university, you knew you would be able to do. But in the last 10 years, we've come to a place where it is literally impossible for youth to own homes in our biggest centers and increasingly even in our small towns. And that is totally unnecessary. I call it the promise of Canada. It's better than the American dream. American dream is kind of, you wake up from a dream, but a promise is something that is honored if you do your part of the bargain. Our youth today are doing more than their part of the bargain. They are working longer than probably any generation before them since the Second World War to get less and less. And I want to ensure that they know that they don't have to live like this. They can demand better from their country. They deserve homes, jobs, and hope. And that's what we're going to deliver for them.
Just a little bit there of Pierre Poilievre. I like it when he talks about his personal life because I like to know that the person I support is a real, decent person. And I'm not going to say here that Mark Carney is not a decent person. He probably is. I don't know the man. But when you listen to the Q&A that Mark Carney did about 15 minutes ago in the pod, and you listen to the Q&A that Pierre did, who do you think relates better to the middle class? Who do you think has a better understanding of what we, the middle class, are dealing with? You heard Mark Carney talking about using all kinds of business buzzwords about the private sector and the public sector and regulations and this and that. And then there's Pierre talking about the hardest job that goes on around him is his wife getting the kids out the door in the morning. How relatable is that for a lot of people? You know, he's talking about coming from humble beginnings. I don't know much about Mark Carney, and I don't think anyone does. He's a secretive individual, but he's very wealthy. And I don't know that he resonates with the average Canadian. I think people can understand and relate perfectly to what Pierre just said, and I'm not sure that they can to what Mark Carney said. And at the end of the day, if you're going to give somebody your vote, you'd at least like to know that they're a good person and that they've got the middle class at heart. And I believe after hearing that Pierre does have the middle class at heart. I got to move on because I'm almost at time, longer than I intended to go here already, but I'm going to try and keep this concise. Yesterday on the CBC show, Rosemary Barton Live, Chris D'Entremont was on there. He is the former Conservative member of Parliament from Nova Scotia who crossed the floor the other day to the Liberals. And the CBC wanted to ask him, hey, why'd you do it? What was going on? Here's a little bit of Chris D'Entremont.
No, I mean, this has been a thought for a long time, basically from the election, hearing from longtime supporters that wouldn't support me anymore because of the leadership style of the Conservative Party. So, I've been thinking about it a lot. And, I think people saw that I wasn't being utilized within my party and they were reaching out. And when I had that meeting with the Prime Minister, because I really hadn't had the opportunity to meet Mr. Carney before. That did help a lot in making it clearer of what I wanted to do. But I tell you, what really made it, what sealed the deal is when I got yelled at when this became part of part of the news on Tuesday.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack there. I certainly want to hear about the yelling in a second, but I want to be clear. You said you weren't being utilized, or people were telling you weren't being utilized with the Conservatives. Did the Liberals suggest that there's more opportunity on their side of the floor, that you could be a contender for a cabinet spot, for example?
No, absolutely not. I think it was just looking at the mechanisms that they have. They would talk about, the caucus that we have here in Nova Scotia, the way caucus worked, what kind of input caucus was able to have in developing the budget. Those are all things that really don't happen over in the Conservative caucus. And quite honestly, this is a time in Canada where we should be really looking at building and trying to find ways to, counteract tariffs and everything else that's going on in the world. It's a time to work together. And, over the summer, I didn't see an opportunity, or I didn't see a move to work together. All I saw was more division and more anger.
And that's because our country is divided and our country is angry. This guy is the biggest hypocrite. He's saying, my constituents thought that I was underutilized. But he won't say that he got offered a position where he could be utilized more by the Liberals. Actually, I meant in caucus is what I meant. Well, the public has no idea what goes on in caucus, so you're a liar. You're a liar, Chris. Tell us the truth. What did Mark Carney offer you for your vote? What did he give you? Because it seems like you sold out a lot of Canadians that had a faint hope that things could get better if this budget was defeated and we went to an election. He's not being truthful here, in my estimation. Nothing about what he said so far sounds honest. To say it was about the leadership style of Pierre Poilievre, or the leadership, I don't buy it. I think Chris didn't like it. I think Chris has probably always had liberal tendencies. I think Chris wants to be part of the Liberal Party, and that's totally fine. But he should step down, and we should have a vote again. If you want to cross the floor and betray the people who sent you to Ottawa, then there should be another election.
How many people did you believe were considering crossing the floor with you when you had that conversation with the Prime Minister?
I really think there was probably 3 or 4. We've heard upper numbers. I only know one for sure that was maybe considering it. So, it's always a maybe, but I think I see a lot of people.
Wait, was it 3 or 4 or upwards? Or was it the one that you know of? What is he talking about? Who is this guy? How did he even get elected as a Conservative?
In the Conservative caucus, many of them are friends of mine. I hope someday they'll forgive me. But, people aren't happy with the leadership style, not just of the leader, but of the leadership team that's there. Quite honestly, a lot of times I felt it was a part of a frat house rather than a serious political party.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it was about who was friends with who. What kind of fun could you have with something? How could you end up beating up on someone else? What kind of negativity could you who could be the most negative? Who could be the most cutting? That kind of stuff. It wasn't about opposing something. It wasn't about keeping government to account. It wasn't about trying to do the best for your constituents. It was about tearing down. And again,
that's a popular Liberal talking point. Liberals seem to hate it when you point out that things are wrong and things are being done wrong. For example, if you oppose the budget, you're not tearing down Canada. You're standing up for Canada. And that's exactly the argument that Pierre Poilievre and literally every single Conservative member of Parliament will make. He was complaining, it's very cliquey. It's really about who you're friends with. But he also said he's friends with them, and he hopes they'll all forgive him. This guy is talking out of both sides of his mouth like a typical Liberal politician. What's the truth here, Chris? What did you get offered? You didn't do this for nothing. You've been thinking about it apparently for years. Is it because they didn't support you to be speaker? Is that what the problem is, Chris? Have some integrity, Mr. D'Entremont. You go in there tomorrow and quit. Step down, ask for a by-election, and go ahead and run again as a Liberal. Opposition's job is to oppose. It's to make the country better by making the government accountable. They don't get a blank check to do whatever they want. That's not bringing the country down. It's making the country better. Chris doesn't like that, though, because Chris wasn't getting anything for Chris.
You said that what really clinched the decision for you was getting yelled at. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm sure when the Politico issue came out, I mean, everybody had that on their phone by budget time. You know, I had the leader, the House leader and the whip barge into my office, you know, push my assistant aside, rush in, push, take the door and just push it wide open. To sit there and, you know, tell me how much of a snake I really was, and turning my back on my constituents and the people that voted for me, and really underline the situation that I made this decision. You know, this was not, it wasn't about, hey man, maybe you're not doing well, maybe we've misunderstood what your objectives were. There was none of that. It was just, how dare you do that? How dare you? And it really pushed me to a point where it's like, okay, well, I guess my decision is made for sure now.
Yeah, because it was too late to go back. It was too late because you'd already let the horses out of the barn. You know what? I'll say it too. I don't think there was anything wrong with Andrew Scheer saying to him, "You're a snake and how dare you?" Because he's a snake and how dare he? He got the Conservatives in Nova Scotia to elect him, send him to Ottawa with all of the expense accounts and all of the perks and all of the time off and the huge salary. And it was Conservatives who put him there. And then he totally slapped them in the face and walked away. If you're in Nova Scotia, if you're one of my Nova Scotia listeners, let me know how you're feeling about Chris d'Entremont here. Because I don't understand how he could possibly run again. I don't understand it. After he completely abdicated all of the promises that he made you. As recently as 2 weeks ago, he was criticizing Mark Carney. He was criticizing the Liberals. He was apparently a conservative. And then all of a sudden he flipped his ideology overnight? No. He's felt this way for a long, long time. He lied to you. He lied to the party, and now he's doing what he wanted to do all along. Be a Liberal. But he couldn't get elected as a Liberal in that riding. He got elected as a Conservative in that riding.
You campaigned against the Liberals just 6 months ago, and now you might actually be key to handing them a majority government. How are you personally squaring those two things?
It's hard in a way. I know what my positioning was during that election. You know, people will say, well, you know, I voted for you or the Conservatives or the platform or many different things. But I know that I did not really run on the Conservative platform. The platform that we had, you know, did not address some of the things that we needed here. Fishing, of course, is always an important issue here. We tried to stay away from, you know, pictures of the leader and all those things, because every single door or many of those doors that we went to, it was, Chris, I can't vote for you this time because I don't like Pierre Poilievre. So we had to try to you know, adapt our campaign style to be able to try to put that to a side and try to ignore some of those facts. But there's a number of things that I can attach to within the platform that the Liberals put out.
He lied to you. He lied to you. And you know what? For him to make it seem like that Pierre Poilievre was the problem. How dishonest is that now? And it just adds to something that I said right back at the beginning of this episode. This guy lied to his constituents, and he is now participating in the media cover-up. The media is covering up Mark Carney's budget. They don't want Canadians discussing that, and they do not want Pierre Poilievre to continue leading the Conservative Party. That is a big problem for Liberals, Pierre Poilievre. They want to do anything they can to get rid of him. They did what they did in his riding. He lost his seat, but he found his way back into the House. Now, with a leadership review coming up in January, they want to try and get rid of him again. And they're using Chris d'Entremont here as all the proof you need that he's not fit to lead. This was all about Pierre Poilievre. Chris, I love you, but I don't like Pierre. Well, clearly somebody did, because he won running for Pierre. This guy's full of it. I'm glad he's gone. And you know what? If there is anybody else that ran as a conservative, but really identified more with the Liberal platform, What the hell are you still doing there? Step down and ask for a by-election. Step down. Walk away. You should not be participating in that kind of ridiculous behavior as a member of government, member of parliament. Well, I got elected this way. It was the easy way to get elected, but I actually do agree with their platform more. Then piss off. If you want to join them, step down and run for them. But you got elected by conservatives. And that's a big problem that you are still sitting there and you've crossed the floor. And I have no doubt there are high pressure tactics being applied on other members of parliament to try and get them to cross, because Mark Carney only won a minority and he's going to do everything he can to circumvent democracy and get himself a majority. That's it for me, friends. Have yourselves a great day. I'll see you right back here tomorrow with another episode of After 9.